To begin, I'm drafting my basic bodice. Shoulder to armhole is 9 inches. Shoulder to bust is 10 inches. My shoulder to under bust is 14 inches. And shoulder to waist, I'm taking 22 inches. So I'll mark on the other side and I'll connect into straight lines. So next I'll mark the hem allowance of 1.5 inches, though I won't be needing it in this tutorial. Next I'll insert my shoulder measurement, 9 inches plus half an inch allowance. This is my chest line, bust line, the under bust line, and the waistline. So my bust measurement divided by 4 is 10.4. I'll mark that on the chest line. And on the bust line, I'll also mark 10.4 inches. I'll divide my under bust measurement by 4, and that will give me 8.25. And waist measurement divided by 4 is 9.5 inches. So I'll mark 9.5 inches on the waistline. Next, I'll mark a neck width of 3 inches and depth of 2 inches. And connect the points. Just so I get a straight line, I'm going to mark 2 inches there. Then I'll connect it to a straight line. Then on the shoulder line, I'll go down by 1 inch. And I'll connect that to the neck width. Remember, I marked 9.5 inches on this line. I'll also mark that on the chest line, 9.5 inches, and I'll connect into a straight line. Now I'll draw the curve for the back armhole with my curved ruler. So the next thing I'll do is to measure the distance here. That gave me 8 inches. I'll divide that by 2, giving me 4 inches. I'll mark 4 inches here. I'll go in by 0.75 inch and draw the curve for the front armhole. Now remember, my underbust measurement divided by 4 is 8.25. I'll add 1 inch for that allowance to that, and then I'll add 1 inch to the chest and bust line as seam allowance, and 1 inch to the underbust for seam allowance. On the waistline, 1 inch for that allowance and 1 inch for seam allowance. Next, I'm going to connect the points into straight lines. Now the waist to the underbust. Next, I'll mark the bust pan. I'm using 7 inches divided by 2, that's 3.5 inches, and I'm going to add half inch to that. So I'll mark 4 inch on the bust line all the way to the waistline, and then connect that into a straight line. On the bust line, I'll go down by 1 inch, and then next I'll mark half inch on both sides of the underbust line, half inch here, and half inch on both sides of the waistline as well. And then I'll connect the underbust to the waist here and here, and the underbust to 1 inch below the bust line. Next, I'll draw the neck curve for the front and for the back neckline. This is for the front neckline. For the back neckline, I'll go down by 1 inch and I'll mark it 1 inch and draw a curve as well. So this curve is for the back neckline. So now I'll cut out my pattern. I'll cut through the neckline for the back, because I'll use this to cut the back pattern later. This will be my seam allowance to join the shoulder. And I'll connect that into a straight line. I'll continue cutting. So now I'll cut through the armhole for the back panel. That's what I'm doing now. So next I'm going to use this to cut out my back panel. So here it is, I'm done cutting it. I added 1 inch allowance to it, to the back panel, so that's it there. Now I'm going to cut out the armhole and the neckline for the front panel. This is the neckline for the front. I'm doing this because I've already used it to cut out my back panel. So next I'll cut out the armhole for the front panel. So next, place the front panel on the paper and trace. Make sure the paper you're drafting with is big enough for the front panel and has extra room for the lapel you'll be making. At the shoulder, I added half inch allowance, but while tracing, I will not include it. This is what I have, so I'll draw the shoulder lines. Smooth the sharp points. So while tracing, I noted the bust line here. Now from the bust line, I'll go up by 2 inches and I'll mark 2 inches. And then at the waistline, I'll extend the line by 1 inch and I'll mark. This distance is determined by the diameter of the button you want to use. Now on the neck, I'll mark 1 inch inwards. Remember, this is my bust point. Now I'll connect this point to the 1 inch point at the neck. Now I extend it downwards a little bit more. Now I'm making sure I have 1 inch here, 1 inch. So I'll connect that straight down. Now you can choose to curve the hem if you like. Just mark 1 inch from the edge there and curve it like so. Now I draw a straight line to connect the 1 inch mark to the shoulder line. This point is called the break point. This is where the left and right lapel overlap. And this part will be the part that's exposed when you wear the jacket. This line is called the roll line. So I'll fold the paper along the roll line. Just watch what I'm doing. After folding, I'll use my pin to transfer this line all the way here to paper at the bottom. So I'll just poke holes like this. Make sure the pin comes out on the other side of the paper. Once I'm done with that, I'll open up a paper. Now I'll use my pencil to trace it so you can see. So I'm tracing the dotted lines I made. I'm going to erase this at some point. Next, following the curve of the traced neckline, I'll extend the curve by 1.75 inches into the front of the jacket from there to there, and then I'll connect into a straight line. And from this point, I'm going to mark 2 inches, making sure it's parallel to the shoulder line. And then I'll connect into a straight line. Make sure you notch this point, it's very, very important. From here to here is 1.75 inches, and here to here is 2 inches. I'll also notch this point. So now I'm going to connect this part to this part with my straight ruler. And then I'll redraw that straight line by slightly curving the line. So I'm using a curved ruler this time. Next, I'll refold the paper along the roll line. I'll trace the outline of the lapel like this. Once more, using a pin, I'll poke holes through the paper. Note that I'm poking the curved line, not the straight line. Now reopen the paper. You can use the dots. These are the points I notched earlier. So I'll trace the dots with a pencil. I'm just following the dots basically. Now remember, this part is curved, so I'll be using the curved part of this ruler for that. Now this is the actual neckline. I'll measure 0.25 inch towards the shoulder. Take note, towards the shoulder. Okay, so I'll mark 0.25 inch. And the next thing I'll do is measure the neckline of the back panel. So I have 1 inch allowance there. So starting from the marked place you can see, I'll measure what I have from there to this point. Because I have 0.5 inch seam allowance there, I won't be measuring that, so I'll stop at that point. So I have 3.5 inches. To this I'll add 0.125, that gave me 3.625. So I'll place my tape on the 0.25 mark and mark 3.625 inch upwards. Now divide that by 2 and mark the midpoint. Connect into a straight line. At this point, I'll take my measurement very carefully. I'll mark ½ inch towards the shoulder, then connect it to this point. Next, I'll blend the line because I don't want it sharp. Next, I'll place my ruler on this line, making sure it's touching the neckline. On this line, and I'll mark 2.75, and I'll draw a line like so. Note that the collar is facing the direction of the neck and not the shoulder. Next, from this notched point, I'll mark 1.75 inch. So from there, I'll mark 1.75 inches, and I'll draw a line. And I'll connect this point to this point. Erase this line. That was the part I told you I would erase earlier. So I'll connect this with my marker again so it will be very visible. Connect this part to here, the straight line, and I'll draw a curve here and make sure it blends into the neckline. Line is the center back. Next, I want to trace the collar. I'll trace this part do that, here's a quick tip. Since I don't have one of those transparent tracing papers, I decided to use this lightweight fusible interfacing. So I'll place it over the draft and trace out. Remember that this part is slightly curved. You can tape it down so it doesn't move around while you're tracing. This is what I have. Once again, I traced here to here, here to here, and here to here. Next, I'll place it back on my pattern, and remember this part on the shoulder. See this? Can you see this part on the shoulder? I'll mark that part just to notch the area. The tracing paper, I'm going to mark that point on the shoulder, so you can see it clearly. I'll go over the lines with my marker. And I'll set it aside. Now back to the main pattern. I'll mark 1 inch. Remember the roll line? That's where I folded the paper on earlier. So I'll basically be connecting this 1 inch mark to meet the roll line. I'm just marking dotted lines. Once again, I marked 1 inch. I marked 1 inch and drew dotted lines to connect it to the roll line I folded on earlier. I'll go over it with my marker. Place the traced color back on it and transfer the dotted lines to it. Remember at the beginning, this was the original neckline, then I measured 1 inch this way. So I'm going back to the initial neckline and I'm going to cut through that line this way and then down. So let's start cutting. Cut this way. Please pay close attention to how I'm cutting this. I'll cut this part and stop there. And then I'll go up this way. And then, like I said, I'm going to cut through the actual or initial neckline here. Let me show you. So I'll place my pattern back. Remember, I left out this ½ inch allowance. When I place it back, this is the neckline here, so I'll cut along here, then cut this way instead of this way. I'll cut through this line. Make sure you choose out your color before you cut out the body so you don't get confused. Now I'll fold along the roll line. This is what I have. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside and continue with the color. Now from this point I'm marking 3 inches, and I'll divide that by 4. That gives me 0.75. Sorry, I didn't get to show you that. So I marked 0.75 inch here, 0.75 inch here, 0.75 inch here, and 0.75 inch here. And this is the part I notched earlier. So I'll go down here as well and mark 0.75 inch. And connect them into straight lines. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just trim the excess off. Next, I'll slash through the 4 lines, starting on the straight side. I'll make sure not to slash all the way through to the end. I left a little bit of space there. I'll do that for all 4 lines. I'll trim off the excess here as well. Place it on another piece of paper. Now I'm going to spread this by 1/2 inch. So I will be using my tape to measure 1/2 inch here, and I'll tape it down. I'll measure 1/2 inch here as well and tape it down. Last one, I'll measure 1/2 inch and I'll tape it down. Make sure your pattern is flat on the paper, and then I'll secure this parts with tape. So I'll just connect those points, those open spaces, the spreads. I'll connect them. And then I'm going to cut this out. Now this is what I have. Those dots. I'll place this such that the notched part matches the shoulder. Can you see? This part will be sewn to the back neckline. I'll show you what I mean. This is my back panel. Remember, it has 1 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to fold that out of the way and match it. As you can see, it matches perfectly with the pattern. So when I sew this, it's going to match perfectly. This line is actually going to fold like this. Because it's on paper, you might not really understand what I mean, but I'll show you in my next video. Now I have my front and back bodies here. For the back, I have 1 inch allowance at the center back and 1/2 inch allowance on the shoulder. I'll match both pieces at the hemline here. Make sure the pattern is well matched. Remember, I cut out the 1/2 inch allowance on the front bodies. I'll put it back when cutting on fabric. This goes here. As you can see, the roll line runs from up, as in at the center back of the collar, that is from the dotted lines to the lapel. For the hem, I'm marking ½ inch all the way, ½ inch here, ½ inch here as well. I'll do that all the way to the end, and I'll connect into a line, a straight line. Here, so this line continues. I'm going to add ½ inch and blend it when I'm cutting on fabric. Now I'll separate the back and cut out the front. Now for the back, I'm also marking ½ inch, and I'll connect the dots into a straight line. And I'll cut it. Now I'll place my front bodice back on it. As you can see, the center back is straight while the center front is a bit curved. I already added allowance to the back. I'll add ½ inch allowance to the shoulder when cutting on fabric, ½ inch here as well, and blend it to this part. I added ½ inch here already. I already added allowance here as well. The armhole doesn't need allowance. I'll basically be adding allowance to the shoulder, this part, and here. See you in my next video. Bye.